Here we go today on another episode of the XRP podcast. It's going to be a good one today because I'm going to have Brad on. And you know him, of course, from the XRP Las Vegas event, doing a great job. We're going to talk about that today and why we're seeing so much activity in the markets. There are some interesting points that we're going to hit in that toward the end of the show. You want to stick around for that. It is going to be unreal. Let's just get right into it. I want to bring into the show Mr. Bradley Kimes. How are you?
I'm great, Paul. How are you?
How's it? Okay, so we got the event happening. You guys are rolling. What is what can I expect this year that I didn't see last year? Can you give
Oh,
me
that's
any sneak
such a
peeks?
great question. Great question. Well, what you're going to see, one, is the top industry leaders, former regulators,
Yep.
telling you where the vision is going post legislation, because it is on the precipice of passing in the Senate, I believe, with the Clarity Act. And I know we'll get into that, and there's
Yep.
conversations. But we're also going to have, in addition to the top industry leaders, former regulators on stage, we're going to have AI on our stage, and T54 will be on stage, and virtual protocols will be on our stage. And having that conversation about how agentic AI and crypto together are going to create that exponential
Yep.
growth that this market's been waiting for.
Agentic AI on an XRP Las Vegas stage. I mean, man, you guys you come a long way, Brad.
Yes. Right.
The event has completely started to line up there. Of course, you got a line list of people, Chris Giancarlo, Garlinghouse, Ashish coming in, Jack, of course, and many more that we'll see. I know that there's a big event with the Easy A guys. Can you share anything about that?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. Yes, we're doing a hackathon for the last 2 year or last year and now again this year because it was such a success last year. And the hackathon is run by Easy A. Shout out to Dom and Phil Kwok. They're
They're
amazing.
fantastic.
These guys are absolutely setting the world on fire.
These
We
guys
love them.
work hard,
They
by
work
the way.
very hard. They're
It's
very
crazy.
hard. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, they're gonna come and run this hackathon for us again this year. And XRP Las Vegas, along with their help, we're giving away $100,000 in cash prizes to the best ideas building on top of the XRP Ledger ecosystem.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable opportunity. And I don't know of anybody that's given away that amount of money. So I
That's
think we're putting
fantastic.
it's a flag on the moon for the developers and builders
Well,
out
and I
there.
think, this is gonna only open up, the ledger as well, it's already a great platform to most developers there, and they understand what's going on. I know they're doing some, some and they've been doing hackathons around the world, all over the place.
Yeah,
So this would be a good one. I think the fact that it's in Vegas is really good because of its proximity to the West Coast,
absolutely.
and there's a lot of developers in the West Coast. Maybe we'll start to see some of that migrate over. So, all right, so we have the hackathon coming in. We'll have them on stage. We're going to do a lot with that. You've got a lot breaking in the way of new products that are coming out as well. I know there's going to be several new products announced. I won't, let the cat out of the bag because I know several that have talked to us about it. I'm blown away with the amount of new products that are coming out of these companies at the timeline of the event. So connect the dots here. Is May some kind of special period for these companies to launch? What's going on here?
Well, we can't say a lot about these things because we're embargoed on most of the stuff that we know. But you have to start asking yourself the
What's
option,
the timing?
the timing. Are they going to pass this Clarity Act in May? Like, I mean,
Wouldn't that be something? You get a passing of the bill literally, or at least it goes to the Senate and we get
right,
through the Senate. That would be
100%.
essentially the rubber stamp that we need.
Yes.
And timing. Well, listen, you have JP Morgan coming out, you have Franklin Templeton, rocking in all kinds of new Morgan Stanley now. All these different financial infrastructures are institutions that have really started to, I guess, plant their flag in the sand in the sense of, "Yep, we're here. This is what we're gonna be doing." There's no really turning back on this. You've got BlackRock all in. You look at almost every major I even had Diamond, finally got rid of the pet rock theme and decided to, cornerstone the idea of, "Hey, crypto is not gonna go anywhere, and it's here for good." What are you hearing from the high net worth individuals that are gonna be attending, because I've talked to several people that they're coming for very specific reasons this year. What are you hearing in terms of those people?
I tell you, most people feel at this point that I'm speaking to that the Clarity Act is going to happen. They don't know exactly when. I don't either, but they feel like it's getting done this year.
Mm.
And that has put them in a position where they're like, I want to know what is happening with these companies. Some of them they're already invested in,
Yep.
some of them they've been looking at from the sidelines. And isn't that really the micro version of the macro situation, right?
Yeah.
We have all this money sitting on the sidelines. They're just waiting for the Clarity Act
That's
to
crazy.
really take that step forward and get much deeper in this space and the companies and projects they believe in.
I just wonder how deep Ripple could potentially go once that this legislation, this piece of legislation is put through. What kind of tricks do they have up their sleeve that they have literally on, like, the finger on the press release button
Yeah.
for the day that this hits, what is gonna end up? I can't wait for that because I think we're gonna see a lot of companies just start bombarding the industry. The news is gonna come so fast and crazy to keep track of it. It's gonna be crazy.
I totally agree with that. There's so many things I'm sure that we're not aware of, but I would say the one thing that's staring us right in the face is the $13 trillion of transactional volume that G Treasury does every
Yep.
year,
Yep.
and the three trillion that Ripple Prime does that used to be Hidden Road.
Mhm.
So there is an enormous potential there. And as we've heard Brad Garlinghouse comment in interviews and conferences and things of that nature, he has told us directly that not $1 or one transaction has used digital assets, stable coins, crypto in any way. So it's
Yep.
all sitting there waiting at the ready. That's a $13 trillion light switch just waiting to go.
How do you see Ripple dealing with this situation once the clarity gets going to qualify a certain percentage of assets being held to be decentralized and considered a commodity have to be ejected, essentially burned? What do you think is gonna happen? Because Ripple is sitting on a tremendous amount of tokens that essentially a lot of that would have to essentially be burned. What do you think is gonna happen there?
So you're referencing the 20% threshold rule
Yep.
from the Genius Act,
Yep.
right? Okay. So what I see there is basically I actually put this question to Grok and went down on this a couple weeks ago. And the answer I got from Grok was, well, it was actually it was right after we got the digital asset commodity designation.
Right.
And Grok's response to me is that there is no withholding the 20% threshold to XRP and the escrow because it already has been given the digital asset commodity designation. So the
Ooh.
fact that it's been given that designation already takes it past that point. And it went further to say that that was a metric of evaluation. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be
Like,
that
this is
for
the
every yeah,
price you pay. Okay.
exactly. It doesn't
Alright.
mean that in every
That's a
instance
good
because they've
point.
already cleared the hurdle in my eyes
Yeah.
and Grok.
That's a good point to make because I think that is gonna be something that a lot of people would ask. Well, if this is the rule, why isn't this rule being applied? It's like, well, this is the rule now
Right.
as opposed to when these assets were essentially put into this classification by the CFTC
And we
versus
ha
this.
and to your point, we have to remember, the SEC versus Ripple case wasn't for nothing. They spent
Right.
150 to $200 million defending their position, winning that
Mhm.
position, and getting that clarity that no one else in the space has gotten. And something that Charles Hoskinson and many other people forget out here is that Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse, and Chris Larson could have gotten out of that case much earlier if they were just worried about themselves. They could have
Yeah.
gotten out of that free and clear. They chose to stay in for the longer fight for the betterment of the entire space. So I just wanted to remind people of that because I know people, I feel they
Well,
get a
there's a
little.
lot of people that don't even know it, that
That's
are
right.
coming into crypto right now.
Yeah, they have no
They're
idea.
getting into it, and they're looking over on CoinMarketCap, and they're going, "Okay, Bitcoin's the big guy. Ethereum seems to be kind of this scrappy bunch, and then, oh, wait a minute, who's this one right here?" Then they go just do a little bit of digging on Wall Street, and they're like, "Wait a minute, this is the real player over
Yeah,
here."
that's right.
in this game. So it is for a lot of you that are listening right now. Just don't always think that everybody has seen and heard about XRP and the basically the history under the bridge that
Yeah.
has gone on for the last 10 years. So when you're brand new to the market and you're looking at these investments, we understand, guys. We're here to help you, kind of navigate some of that. One of the things that I wanted to hit on was this story right here. I thought, was a good example of just more verification that Ripple is killing it. And that is an $800 billion partnership here with the Korean government bond market. This, of course, is with Kyobo Life, which is going to tokenize their $800 billion bond market, Korea's, which is one of the big, by the way, is also one of the biggest holding nation states in terms of population that hold XRP, the Koreans jumping into that. Here's the tweet right there from Ripple talking about this. What did you make of this when you saw this news?
Oh, well, first of all, you nailed it. So I was excited. I was super excited when I saw it because this isn't the first time.
Yeah.
For people that don't understand, and by the way, I said this to my audience, I'll say it today. So when I see a government allow the tokenization of their debt on a
Hmm.
protocol, it is the greatest unofficial endorsement you could ever get in the world. And by the way, we got it from South Korea here that you just
Yep.
highlighted. We got it from the ECB over in the
Yep.
European Union as well,
Hmm.
with Axology doing it on the XRP ledger with European bonds. And we have it with United States bonds and Treasury T bills with Ondo Finance and Open Eden doing it as well. So this is remarkable to see these countries, what I consider the greatest unofficial endorsement you could ever get.
Okay, so you also had the CEO of SBI Holdings.
Yes.
So he purchased like 5% of Kyoba Life.
Yeah.
This was a few years back.
Yeah.
Then he acquired the company in 2025.
Yeah.
And then Ripple all of a sudden announces the custody for Kyoba Life, which is the first partnership with a major insurance company, right?
I'm sure it's nothing, Bo.
I'm just you're putting this stuff is happening in like out in the open.
You know what's
You-
fascinating about this to me too, to your point that you're making here? It's
yeah,
you're making it so obvious for people who aren't seeing it the way you're looking at it, and you just
yeah,
unfolded that. But the people who really miss this are the maximalists that are stuck in this crypto world.
yes.
This is the larger part of the pie. Watching real world asset tokenization of the rest of the traditional financial world is why I'm here. I know it's why you're here as well. So I think the way you said it is the best way to say it.
Well, think about this too. That acquisition would make Kyobo, I think, the biggest shareholder of SBI.
Yeah, and let us not forget the SBI Yoshitaka Katao at SBI, early seed investor in Ripple as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Interesting times here, people. Interesting times for sure. Other news that I want to hit on is this right here, and that is we're looking at our spring phase potentially. A lot of smart money starts to move, and could we see a little bit of a run here around XRP? I'm just kind of curious. When you look at timing, because to me, it's not timing in the market, it's time in the market. How
Yeah.
long are you looking at holding assets? Everybody is always asking about this in terms of price. You've got price hovering around that 145 support. You can kind of see some of the data right there. But we could see some movement here, especially. Do you think this will be triggered by what will happen with the clarity? Do you think clarity would move price at that point?
If clarity gets done in a seamless way, which it has not gotten done
Yeah.
thus far, because it's been just a cloud hanging over its head, literally the lack of clarity, trying to get clarity done. So it is hard to know, Paul, and I know we're going to get into this part of the conversation in a few minutes and not to rush us there, but we got the geopolitical conflict
No
of
doubt.
Iran and Strait of Hormuz. So could the Clarity Act happen and we get a burst in price? Yeah, seems logical to me. I personally believe the biggest catalysts right now are getting the Clarity Act passed, signed into law,
Yep.
getting the Federal Reserve master skinny account for
Mhm.
Ripple, and the full green light on the national bank charter for Ripple as well. Those things to me really get that way where we say, okay, now we're opened up to the $13 trillion opportunity we heard Brad Garlinghouse talk about that we
Exactly.
highlighted earlier. So can it push to those places? Sure, I think we could see that. But I could also see just as easily that passing something geopolitically taking place that we're revisiting 60, 70 cent range again, like some of the TA people have told us to be aware of, right? So it's hard to know in this market, which is why, like, I love what you just said a moment ago. You know, there's timing the market and time in the market. And I absolutely love that because I'm a time in the market
Yeah.
guy. I don't time the market. So for me, these little things that are happening, I'm looking at these big keystone moments, the legislation, the bank charter, the master account. These things keep me sane in the market because I'm in the market and I'm not trying to time anything. So I just have to hold on to those things in uncertain moments like this. But I do believe we're getting that clarity yet. I really do.
If yeah, I think it's just a foregone conclusion at this
Yeah.
time. It's just a matter of what kind of last minute concessions are gonna have to be made.
Agree.
Other news before we get into the topic of the geopolitical impact, because I think this is the broader look out ahead when you think 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Some of the things that are happening in the Middle East, I think, may end up, causing some other things to happen there. We'll touch on that in a second, but before we go there, I wanna hit on this right here, and that is this issue of not only where because Asia's always been a big market of it in terms of XRP adoption-wise, but now you have, Rakuten, and they launched their wallet. This is XRP as a listed asset. Essentially, this is one of the largest retail players in Japan. They also have a large contingency here in the United States, especially on the retail point of sale systems. Letting users now buy with XRP and loyalty points, guys. This changes a lot around how retail and commerce could happen. The integration connects XRP to Japan's everyday commerce platform spanning 44 million users. Think Amazon, 3 trillion plus in loyalty points. Think about the biggest loyalty platform out there, retail, whether it's American Airlines, Starbucks, any of those, all integrated into one. 23 billion, 5 million merchants. Why wouldn't they just copy repeat this in, Brazil, Argentina, go into any major country in the world and do exactly this?
You know, to your point, I think they're going to because, as you highlighted, I mean, Rakuten is the Amazon of Japan. And for those who don't know, that's how massive this is.
Yep.
And we all know too that we just heard from what was it, Nikita from X.
Nikita Bear. Yep.
Yeah, Nikita Bear. They're getting ready to introduce X Money platform, which is going to be a similar offering, not exactly the same, but a similar style offering, basically the integration of digital assets in one form or another.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going. Amazon's going to have a digital wallet. Walmart's going to have a digital wallet.
Well, I think
I
that's
think
the
they can do
race.
this. Yeah.
This is gonna be a race,
Yes.
for the only thing I'm concerned about well, if you have a loyalty platform, you look at Starbucks right now, biggest one of the biggest loyalty platforms out there. It's mostly retailers, okay, outside of Walmart and Amazon. Then you go to, Starbucks, and I think McDonald's has maybe the 3rd or 4th largest in terms of loyalty. You integrate loyalty, and then you start to look at how they can whether it's launching stable coins, launching some sort of digital asset points that are translated into some sort of cryptocurrency via loyalty points, either purchase or you can redeem here. There's just so much opportunity here, I think, for retail. This is something we've talked about on the channel forever. And I feel like it's finally getting much, much closer, but it's not happening in the United States yet.
We got to get
When
that
you think
clarity.
clarity that's the point.
I do. I do. I think it's keeping all the horses in the barn.
Yeah. As they say, keeping the
Yeah,
horses in the barn,
that's right.
even when it's burning.
No. Well, funny
'Cause
because
I
I
feel
knew
like
this
the
was our
barn's burning
conversation
right now
going.
a little bit.
Well, I do believe there is a geopolitical catalyst and it
Is my
exists
point.
over around the Strait of Hormuz, my friend. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, speaking of that, let's just hit on it. This is here we go. This is the blockade, and let me kinda zoom in on this is the Wall Street Journal. So what you have is basically until now, the strait there, if you guys are watching on the video side of this, you'll see this. This is the strait that basically Iran has control over. And then they basically came in and said, "Okay, we're gonna mine this, so even though we don't know where the mines are, we're also gonna put, points on this to where we can shoot people, and, you're gonna pay us, and you're gonna pay us in crypto."
Yeah.
It didn't say what crypto.
Mm-mm.
Ended up being some stable coin. You got a little Bitcoin there. I imagine there's probably some XRP in the mix, um, because it's easy to transact. And then, of course, the United States comes in and says, "Wait a minute. Well, we're just gonna go block in the inlet that gets you out of here." So basically, in the Gulf of Oman, you have all these Iranian oil tankers and the shadow tankers now stuck, which is why we're seeing the price of oil come down. So, what was your take when you first heard this? And did you think this would be good for crypto?
1000%. It's good for crypto. And number two, what I love about this whole approach to this is it's obvious to me that this government, this president, this administration is trying to make minimal loss of civilian life and US military troops.
Okay.
The way that this has been approached has been to minimize ground troops, that kind of
Yep.
combat, right? And hats off to the president and the administration for doing that. Now, looking at this, do I think it's good for crypto? You better believe I do. Because for one, we've been listening to the propagandists out here say, Iran's controlling the strait. Iran's controlling the strait.
Yep.
Who's controlling it now?
Yeah. Well, now there is no strait. You
Well,
know,
and yeah,
basically
because
all
the
that is
United
is
States
a
Navy is
canal up to
controlling it.
nowhere.
Yeah, because now the United States Navy is controlling it, right? And this has been the chance and opportunity that's been blown over and over and over by whoever the head of the
Yeah.
IRGC is to miss this opportunity to capitalize on negotiations before getting put into checkmate. Because right now you're put into checkmate. You have no
So,
leverage.
but here's what my theory is. Okay, so there's so many things that make you think about this, and you go, "Wait a minute. Look at this map." You can't imagine that the United States is sitting here going, "Well, this is where all of our boats are." We're out here near Oman on the south side of Iran, and up here's where all the mess is happening. Then you go up in here, which is most of the tankers taking on Karg Island, etc. Basically, where they're loading up. They got to go through here eventually because that's the only way out.
That's
All
right.
right. Why didn't they do this like at the beginning?
I think the reason for that was in hopes that you would get somebody to the table sooner, and they just refused to do it, right?
Yeah. I had a strategist on my show, and he and I got into a conversation. It was after the interview. I wish we had recorded. And his statement was, "Listen, part of the military action was really designed to take out the Navy because they didn't want to create any warfare in the Gulf of Oman
Yep.
that they couldn't deal with, so they took out the Navy first, essentially, if you look at this alignment right here, this is kind of the approach they're taking. So with basically one task force of Marines, when they blockade these ships coming out of here, they basically send in 12 dudes, badasses, to take control of the ships. So they get the oil, or the ships just turn around and, the shadow ships just turn around and, hightail it back for an Iranian port, which shuts down the export of the oil itself, which is why we're seeing, fuel prices, or I should say oil prices, WTI and Brent crude both falling through the floor right now. How long you think Trump can hold this?
Well, I think you got about 14 days because that's how long you got until Iran has to turn their own wells off because they can't get the ships out of the strait.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
there's a lid on this thing. And let me just say too, it's nice in hindsight for some people to analyze the situation and say, well, why didn't Trump do this sooner and just get
Yeah.
right to it?
Yeah.
But the reality is, just like we had to expose the world leaders from NATO for being leeches instead of allies,
Bingo. Well, that's true. Good
it
point.
had to be done on the
That
world
was probably
stage.
worth it.
It's
Just
worth
that.
just that, just to
Yeah.
show the world on the world stage that they take our billions to fight their war with Russia
And they're
and
not there.
Ukraine, and they're not there for us to even fly over the space they're in.
Yeah.
So the truth is that the same thing goes for me with optics on the world stage for Iran. You take out the nuclear capabilities, you take out the Air Force, all their establishments, their ballistic missile sites, and the Navy sunk on the bottom of the ocean. You give them a chance of grace to come to the table and they blow it. And then you're
Well,
like,
and it
now the
kinda
world sees
showcased
that.
their cards
Yes.
because they're so defensive of the nuclear capability, so that essentially kinda shows everybody out there that was saying, "Oh, well, they don't even have nuclear desires." Well, the reality is, yeah, that's why they walked away from the table because they wanted
Yeah.
to keep it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so now we know, yeah, you're really bad guys and you really wanna do bad things.
Yes.
So, okay. But the other positive thing that comes out, I don't know if this is positive or not. I wanna get your opinion on this. So, Iran figures out, "Hey, we're gonna do something really tricky here. We're gonna take crypto for our oil and for others who are transacting through here, we're gonna take crypto." What happens now, Brad, if all of these countries around the world, you could look into Asia, Southeast Asia, you could probably even look into areas of South America where there are areas where these countries, nation states, could inflict, these kinds of tolls in crypto now because everything's transacted so quickly. Then you're dealing with something like XRP, which is cross-border settlement elements here. Now you're getting into Ripple. Why wouldn't other countries just say, okay, copy, repeat what they have done here?
Well, to your point, Secretary of State Marco Rubio came out on April 10th, 9th or 10th, I believe
That's
it
a good
was,
point.
and said exactly what you're talking about. In 5 years, we won't be able to stop other
Yeah.
countries from using whatever currencies they want to settle in. So, what I see taking place here, Paul, is an orchestrated, and I do mean calculated and orchestrated
Mhm.
moment that on many levels, yes, is dealing with the nuclear threat of Iran and the terrorist state nation that they are. That
Yeah.
is absolutely dealing with the, the hijacking of the strait, the way that they've dealt with that for the last 47 years. But it's also doing something else that's extremely critical here because you're talking about introducing other currencies and dismantling the petrodollar system, which is, I believe, what we're watching happen. But something else is taking place here. The United States is becoming the emergency gas station to the world right now because we have oil and we
Yeah.
don't
Did you
use
see the
oil
map
out of
on
the country.
on the tankers flooding into the Gulf?
It's over 100, if not 200 plus at this point. So
Yeah.
what's happening is we're now supplying the world in this time of need while we get them sorted out. But here's the other play that a lot of people are missing because none of this stuff works in my mind unless you're looking at it through the US dollar and the
Mhm.
perseverance and the preservation of it as a world reserve currency for the next 150 years.
Mm.
So if you look at the cutting off of that oil and that strait, who gets 50% of their oil there? China does.
China.
And what were they saying a month and a half ago? President Xi was calling for the Chinese yuan to replace the dollar last February, a month and a half ago,
Right.
45 days ago to replace the US dollar.
Well,
You know
look
what
how
he's talking
fast.
about now?
Yeah.
He's talking about oil.
Exactly. Well, that is the petrodollar.
And
So
and he needs that oil out of that
right.
strait. We don't.
So you've got a master course happening right here because
Yes.
the yuan was originally floated out there as a possibility, and then all of a sudden the countries around us said, "I don't want to transact in yuan because the Chinese could basically sanction my yuan,
Yes.
just like they do it with their population. So it's already dirty currency. So
Yes.
they go to a decentralized currency, whether it's stable coins, Bitcoin, XRP, one of those things out there. And now you have this right here, this last story I want to kind of focus on. And that is what is becoming, and this again gets back to my point of headlines. This is a $7.8 billion crypto economy which is finding a new way to grow, all right? Most of it has been through this whole area of pay these transit tolls. My guess is that we're gonna probably see other elements because they're gonna figure out other ways to start to exact different kinds of tolls or fees or whatever else, because I think now they understand they're in a little bit of a catch-22 of being able to escape the strait. But it does roll out this whole point that I'm getting, and that is that more countries are gonna do this. and they're going to do it with, as you just so abruptly put, they're going to do it with currencies that can't be sanctioned, which is crypto in most cases. They're going to do it with transactions that are fast. Then they're going to do it with ones that cross border settle. I mean, it seems like there would only be one thing that you would do it with, and that would be like an RLUSD or an XRP, would it not?
That's how I see it. And I mean, look, to your point, it's gonna take 2 major things to be able to facilitate what we're talking about here, right? First of all, if I just go back really quickly. So, we have to remember while you're shutting this straight down and this blockade is happening,
Yeah.
China needs its oil, and they can't get it. They're trying to race to compete with the dollar as a
And
world
so does the
reserve
EU.
currency, and so does the
The
EU.
EU's stuck in this.
And to exactly that point that you're making,
Mhm.
the EU, the UK, and China all still hold meaningful positions in our US bonds. And isn't it timely that we're choking down the strait so they can't continue to dump those bonds on us while they all need oil right now?
Mhm.
It's a it's a masterful leverage is what this is we're witnessing. And I know I just triggered a lot of TDS people out here, but the reality
Well
is
well, the
that
TDS people come at me so much, and I'm just like, "Listen, I okay, either this guy is the luckiest guy in the world,
oh,
or there actually is a plan here."
there's a serious
So
plan here.
so you can't assume that these things are just happening,
Yeah.
you know?
And look, I mean, everybody in this space, Paul, they always talk about we're moving to a multipolar, multi-asset world. And then when you ask them, well, how's that happening? They go, we're moving to a multipolar, they can't tell you, right? The reality is everyone's hung on these cliche lines, but the
Yeah.
truth is this is the moment. This is the introduction of a multipolar, multi-asset world. This is the dismantling of the
Right.
petrodollar system. We did just hear one of the architects of the petrodollar agreement, Jim Rickards, call for stable coins, Bitcoin and or Ripple XRP to be
Mhm.
used as a solution going forward.
Yeah.
This is how you make amends in negotiating. Now, a lot of people, leftist media, they're all going to say once this is done and you see the introduction of these things, they're going to say, "Well, Trump failed. How smart was that? We had the petrodollar agreement exclusively and now we're sharing it with the world." But what people will miss is the brilliant move that he's done to make us the largest exporter of oil in the world so it won't harm us the way they claim it will. And number 2 is that the private issuance of stable coins,
Yeah.
those holders will hold T-bills that will just crush the numbers that the petrodollar agreement was doing
Well,
for us.
you're exactly right, because this is the funky thing that, when when Iran was, publicly saying we're gonna take stable coins, and,
Yeah,
everybody's like, "Well, stable coins is essentially a US Treasury bill."
yeah,
Maybe it's a little bit of Bitcoin and a little bit of gold, but pretty much it's a Treasury bill,
yeah,
which essentially is a US dollar being printed right now for every stable coin you gotta go out and grab. Granted, it's a one-to-one, so it gets away from, the fractional reserve system that our banks have so eloquently smashed our economy with.
yep.
And now you've got basically the blueprint for a lot of countries to start to understand, all right, this is my way to sanctionless transactions, but in a way, I got to go buy a stable coin. So it's like, wait a minute. But we already know, even though didn't happen during the drift protocol, hack where Circle could have clawed back but didn't. Once that clarity comes through, the Circle, Tether, Ripple, and maybe a handful of other, stable coins, become the sanction chokehold for stablecoins globally. Essentially, just like what used to be an ABA banking routing number where,
Right.
the Fed could call up and freeze your funds in Zurich or wherever, but now it's a stablecoin. What do you make of that? Do you like that? Are you concerned about that?
No, I like it because truthfully, you know, look, if you just look at what China wants to do by having the yuan replace the dollar as a reserve currency,
Well, that's a
fundamentally,
different one because that's surveillance money.
yes, it's surveillance, and
Yeah,
and then plus on top of it, they run their country like a dictatorship, so they're not going to go for the rest of the world holding their bond market hostage
exactly.
the
Yeah.
way the
Yeah.
U.S. bond is held.
Mhm.
So that dog don't hunt either. So you come back to this. How does this happen? This can only happen through the introduction of these digital assets. I remind people to the point that you just made about stable coins. That stable coin, that digital dollar on your phone and your digital wallet is
Mhm.
worth a dollar. The
Yeah.
paper one in your pocket, about 60
Is
to
it worth
70
a dollar?
cents.
Yeah.
So you may even see a period of time where you're paying a dollar 30, a dollar 40 to somebody with paper money and then using just $4 or $5.
Forex, baby.
Yeah, exactly. For your stable coin, right? So
Forex.
this
Yeah.
is where we're at here. So but what it's going to take is something very special to do this, and it is a currency agnostic ledger that has a built-in decentralized
Right.
exchange. And there's only two that have any real deep relationships with
Mhm.
partners around the world, and it is the XRP ledger and the copy of the XRP ledger, which is the XLM Stellar.
Yeah, Stellar. Well, both and Stellar, I think, much more retail oriented. XRP, obviously, the institutional side, which is where most of the money is going to be moving. Especially when you look at banks and nation states.
Yep.
So that's the advantage I think that people still have to get. And I listen for everybody watching or listening into the podcast. We understand this is listen, it's taken me a decade to understand this after being an entrepreneur for 2 decades of
Yep.
understanding money and growth and all that. This is not easy stuff to figure out, but I think it's getting easier because now so many of the roadblocks that used to be in the way have pretty much cleared, and it's a little bit more transparent as to how our government and also really how the world is interacting and will be interacting, especially when you have guys like Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon, all of the major institutionals, which is where most of the money people are watching.
That's right.
Those people say these words on Squawk Box or CNBC or, you know, I think people are going to wake up to this and all of a sudden it's going to be there. Last question I have for you. All right. You've got, we should next, I don't know if you have one on the event lineup this year, but I'm wondering how much of a transition we're going to see. Grayscale put out a big, I don't know if you saw their report on the shift of wealth going from Boomer and Gen X, uh, my Gen X, going to Gen Z and Millennial. And it was happening literally like within the next 5, 6 years, would be when the wealth starts to transfer. It was a significant amount and most of those people in that new generation are much more affluent in terms of digital assets. I'm just curious, when do you think that wealth shift goes from old money, treasuries, dollar, real estate, metals, whatever, asset class you want to flip over into, kind of the heritage and flips into digital assets and it makes a major dent on the economy of the banks? Like, when do you think the banks actually break down?
Wow, that's such a great question. I think all of this hinges on the Clarity Act passing and then us finding out what the split the baby compromise is
Yeah,
inside
yeah.
of that for the banks. So I don't know that we could truly assess it quite quantitatively as I'd like to because we don't know what that's going to be. Like, are they not getting yield? Are they getting yield? Are they shift splitting the yield between the industry and the banks? That will be key to find out. But I do believe whether it's 2030 or sometime after, and like I said,
Mhm.
it depends on the details of the legislation and that
Right.
actually getting passed. But at some point, I do believe banks shift from brick and mortar to being nodes on a network.
Yeah.
And it is their moment right now to seize the brand they own to continue to capture market share in the new digital on-chain
Well,
economy.
look at it this way. I don't know if you saw the news, is totally unrelated, but very related in my opinion. Do you know who Allbirds is?
No.
Okay, so Allbirds was this fast fashion retail shoe company
Okay.
growing like nuts. All right. I mean, literally just going out the wazoo. These guys were about to go bankrupt. I mean, they were literally like on their last, like publicly traded. They sold the entire shoe business and flipped the capital into an AI mining basically renting AI processing for startups, okay?
Mhm.
They're an AI company now. Their stock just pumped this morning 380% when this was announced. This was this morning's on the Wall Street Journal. And I'm like, hmm, imagine a bank that
It's
just
doing
said,
that.
we're just going to go all in on crypto, 100%. There could be some banks out there, Brad, that could do that.
I think you're gonna be right and see it
Yeah.
too, because I think someone is going to snap and focus. They'll snap into focus on it, and they'll see this moment,
Yep.
and it's no different than the dot-com boom. I mean, you and I
What bank
remember.
will do it first is my
Well,
question.
there it is. I don't know which one
What
will be
bank
smart enough to
will
do it
do it
first.
first?
I mean, you start looking at the early partners, PNC was an early partner in the United States, right? Bank of America is an early partner in
Yeah.
that space too. So I would look to those that have been here the longest to be the ones to strike first on that.
Well, there you go. All right, guys, you know what to do. I'm going to give you one last point here, and that is attend this event right here, and that is the XRP Las Vegas event happening right there. And we are down to, let's go to the day counter, 14 days, 12 hours away from the best event that focuses on not only digital assets, but of course the XRP ecosystem. And we're going to see a lot of people out there. We'll be doing a media stage out there. Come by and say hello. We'll be having some of the, the best minds in the business chatting about what's going on and what's next out there. So, Brad, can they get any good discounts right now? What's my offer?
Yes, they can. All the discounts have been locked in at this point.
Okay.
So go get your tickets. 589 GA ticket was $900, 589. All the other tickets adjusted accordingly. And that was to celebrate passing the Clarity Act, which hasn't happened yet. But we're liable to celebrate it coming out of Senate banking committee. So do not mess around. We got an incredible lineup for you out
All
there.
right, there you go. You guys make it there. Brad, always fun having you on the show. Thanks very much for coming in today.
Thank you, Paul. Always a lot of fun. Appreciate you.